Welcome to my final episode of the Inside the Wubble web series. Special guest in the building. I get DMs about Kia Nurse coming to Inside the Wubble. I get a lot of when is Kia Nurse coming to Inside the Wubble. So don't ever say I don't get things done, fans. With the last and the final episode of Inside the Wubble, we have New York Liberty Guard Kia Nurse in the building.
Hello.
So Kia Nurse, talk to me about the bubble. This is obviously a weird year. And for you, it's obviously been a bit of a transition. You know, a lot of players don't want to talk about, transition years or rebuilding years because you want to win right now. But, you have the youngest team in the league. On paper, you're the youngest team in the league, 6 rookies, and you're only in your 3rd year of being a professional. But you've had to step up and be a leader. Like, I know the rookies don't really look at you like a young player. They look at you like, you've been here before. You were an all-star last year. So tell me a bit of it, like embracing this new role as like one of the leaders of the New York Liberty.
Yeah, it's been different, I would say, for people that have been like, oh, you're going to be a vet and kind of throw that word out there. When I'm in my 3rd year, I wouldn't have expected that. Like I'm still on a rookie contract, at least let me get off a rookie contract before you tell me I'm a vet. But I think it's been a different transition, and especially because this year, like you said, coming in, we're so young on paper. I was in their shoes only 2 years ago.
Right.
So it's hard for me to feel like I have all this extra experience, which I do have a lot of experience, thankfully, from national team and Olympics and that kind of stuff. But also knowing exactly what they've been through and that still being extremely fresh in my mind has been something that I've used to my advantage to kind of like bridge that gap between a super vet and the rookies. And I think that's been really fun to be a part of. Obviously, I think it's been hard too, just because we are so young. So we're going to make rookie mistakes. And when I was a rookie, there was only me. Right. So when I made a mistake, you could cover it up. The vets would cover it up for me and it wouldn't look as crazy as it was. But when you have 3 rookies on the court at the same time, 4 rookies, sometimes we have a whole lineup of rookies on, those mistakes seem like they get amplified because it's harder to cover up for each other because we just don't typically, they don't know. They're learning. They're finding their way in this league. So that's been really fun to kind of just see how that's rolled, stay encouraging, stay positive, which is obviously really hard in a season where you want to win and we haven't won very much.
Right.
But it's been rewarding to be a part of this.
Could you imagine being 3 years ago? So let's say COVID-19 happened 3 years ago. Could you imagine coming in as the only rookie and like this being your experience as your inaugural year in the WNBA?
No, I think, you know what, I feel for them because they had not only their NCAA season was then cut short, they didn't get to finish it. And for a lot of them, that was their opportunity to really get to a Final Four and push and win. And then they come here and their draft experience isn't what it was because it was virtual. So I do feel for them. I think they have a little bit of an advantage in the sense that the bubble is similar to college in where, I have 2 roommates. I'm a grown woman. I got 2 roommates. And you're always around the same people. So the environment is kind of similar to that. So that I think they have a bit of an advantage just coming straight out of that into here. But I don't know. I mean, in terms of being here, being thrown into the fire right away, having to play meaningful minutes, having to play a lot of minutes, I think that would be really, really tough. I think our rookies have done a good job with it, but it'd be really tough.
So for you, you've been kind of like your life in basketball, especially in professional basketball, kind of came at you fast. You've been in the league only 3 years. Year 2, you're an all-star. You signed with Jordan as well in year 2. And then coming full circle a year later, for those who don't know, yesterday you debuted the Air Jordan 35. And not only did you debut the Air Jordan 35, first woman to debut the 35 or Jordan period, right?
35 for sure. Close to, I think I did a little bit of the 34 last year. But I think this was like the first one where we like a woman debut part of it.
So dope. So not only that, but it was also you scored your career 1,000th point as well. So big day for you yesterday, even though obviously the game may not have went as you guys have hoped for. For you, it was a big day. And obviously, like the process it is for the New York Liberty, but just looking back on your career and getting to this point, at the end of the day, you were on a team with a bunch of megastars. You were drafted. I feel like personally, this is obviously a biased opinion. I do think people let you slip too far in the draft. However, you did. And even though you did, you've manifested your career in ways that people probably did not believe, but bias, I believe it happened. But do you look at moments like these and just think, wow, like where I'm at now, like if you would have told me this, like if somebody told you this 3 years ago or 4 years ago, would you have believed it?
No, flat out no. I think most people don't know that I was like really questionable whether I was going to get drafted or not in terms of myself. It was hard for me to believe like, oh, am I even going to get invited to the draft? And if I do get invited, like, am I just going to sit there and wait till I get picked like second, third round? And I think that was pretty frightening for me. And coming into this league, the role that I played at UConn and the role that I played at New York my first year and then my second year was, completely different. And it was more of a role that, my parents had talked to me about because they'd seen me play it in high school and they'd seen me play it, growing up playing basketball. So that was really new for me. And I don't know, I was sitting down yesterday thinking about it and I'm like, oh, I hit 1,000 points today. How many people have come through this league and either have had ups and downs and weren't able to kind of stick on a team or move to a bunch of different teams, or there's only 144 spots. So maybe they just didn't make it that year, but they were good enough to. And I've had the opportunity to be here long enough to score 1,000 points.
Right.
And I think that's kind of like insane for me to think about now. It's one of those things where, yeah, my year this year in terms of like my shooting percentage and everything else on the court hasn't been great. It's been hard because I've made such a huge jump in that second year to now where I am in my third year. It wasn't as big of a jump. It actually doesn't feel good at all. But to feel like, okay, I scored 1,000 points and that's something no one can ever take away from me. Right. So like at some point in my life, I can tell my little like children that I scored 1,000 points in the WNBA, and hopefully more than that eventually. But that's something that's really resonated with me and really been like, wow, that's like a legitimate accomplishment. And I did it in 3 years. Like that, I never would have imagined.
I think so. I get all the UConn women on my platform. Obviously, I went to college with all of you. Obviously, you and I have, had a special relationship. So I've personally been able to witness all of you guys develop. And I always say yours was like the most, humbling to watch because, for people who don't know your story, you were not, the star of that UConn dynasty. You were a big piece of it. But, in my opinion, you didn't get as much recognition as I thought you should have got as a player on the team. And it's funny because it's like those things happen, but it's like everything comes full circle. If you always kept your head down and just worked, and 1,000 points later, a Jordan deal later, it just seems like it's all starting to pay off. If you were talking to Kia Nurse senior year at the University of Connecticut, before the draft, before the tournament, just before the season started, what would you say to her?
Oof. I would probably remind her that it's a process and that I didn't lose who I was as a basketball player because my role changed.
Right.
And I think that it changed in a lot of different ways in the sense of like I had one role at UConn, which a lot of the time was to be a defensive stopper. I always matched up with the top guard on their other team, knock down open shots. And that was something that I had been put into really in like my first year when I started starting there. And that was a testament to the fact that we had Brianna Stewart, Clena Mosqueda-Lewis, Mariah Jefferson, Morgan Tuck, Kia Stokes. So my job was to play great defense, and then when I'm on the court to not be a liability so that people couldn't just run away from me and go double them. So hit those open shots. So I think that role continued to grow as I went through UConn. But defense was always kind of that primary part for me. And before that, coming out of high school, like I was a scorer, and that was my primary role. So, it kind of almost completely flipped. And for me, it was like, okay, I can play defense, but in a professional league, you have to be able to do a little bit of everything. Like you can do one or two things good in the WNBA. Like you can have one move, literally a left to right crossover. If you get people on it every single time because you perfected it, you'll be fine with it.
Like the James Harden step back.
Exactly. Like it's something that's so simple. You know they're going to it, but they get to it anyways. I didn't know if I had something like that. And I didn't know if I had, anything more than my defense to offer a team. And a lot of times defense is great, but if you can't put any points on the board, you can't be effective offensively.
Right.
There's only a limited amount of time you can play. That's how I've always seen the game.
Right.
So I think I would tell her, like, you don't lose who you were because you were in a certain role. Like that, all of that thought process and all that scoring process, it came back to me when I got to New York. And then when I went to Australia and I was put in that situation where they were like, no, you need to score and you need to be effective offensively. Right. So gaining that confidence and knowing it's a process and it's going to change and you'll be on different roles, but like who you were and who you are, you're going to continue to grow that. Even though you might put it in the back for a little bit, a couple of years, it'll come back to life. It's like riding a bike. You never lose it.
So what was it like, you talk about your role expanding in places, and obviously your role, it's funny because your role professionally, they gave you a lot more responsibility in your professional career than they did in your collegiate one. I definitely, even in the WNBL, you won an MVP in the WNBL, you have 2 championships in the WNBL and an MVP. What was it like going to Australia and becoming like the star and having to really carry a team? Obviously you had great talent around you, Kelsey Griffin, Mariana Tolo, Madison Rachi, shout out to them. But you had to be, you were brought there to be that player. Did it help you in your WNBA career to go to Australia and have to be the woman of the team, that person that, when the game's on the line, you got to get the last bucket, or we need a bucket right now. Kia, get us a bucket.
Yeah, it definitely did. And I think that started, especially after my first year in the WNBA and then translating, between my first and second year. That was huge for me because there was a lot of similar systems to what we were running in the WNBA. So I was still technically getting that kind of training aspect. So when you go overseas, you have to find ways to improve your game. But at the same time, you don't just have like free time with your trainer to work out and just work on things in your game. Like you are working within the system and the practice system of that team you're on. So it was a great place for me to be because Coach Gorish there, like he made sure that I was still doing things that were pretty similar to what I was doing in the WNBA and then would need to translate to the national team as well. So I think it was huge for me to go there and have that bigger role and have that place where like people legitimately were defending me as like a first option or like a second option. Obviously we had Kelsey and Tolo too. So if you're asking me, I'm throwing the ball at the Kelsey. But we had tons of plays. And I remember in my second year on that championship game and that game winner, we didn't call a timeout. So the ball went out, we got a turnover and he didn't call a timeout. And he looked at me and he was like, we're running away. And away was a play for me to come off a double stagger at the top and shoot the 3. And I'd gotten it time after time. And I looked at Kelsey and I was like, oh, for me. Like I was like, like I have to make a play here. And it all worked out for the best.
Right.
But to be in that situation and to be around 2 incredible leaders in Kelsey and Tolo, that was huge for me to develop my game because they, in Australia, had this unwavering confidence in me, whether I made the shot or didn't make the shot.
Right.
So it was like every time, like, no, we need one. We're just going to go to you. It's fine. We'll go here. Or if someone has fouls, we'll just put Kia in there. So, like that stuff was really easy for me to help translate. So when I came back, I had like this crazy confidence in what I could do and in my abilities to be effective offensively within the WNBA.
That's dope. That's awesome. So just kind of turning the page back into the Wubble. What has your experience been like inside the Wubble? What do you do on a day-to-day? Like what is a day in the life of Kia Nurse inside the Wubble? Because I know the Wubble for you is coming to a close soon in a few more days. But your experience and your time there, what was that like?
It's been really interesting. I'm not sure if you just heard Amanda Diaby by friends, but that's kind of like my day. I spend, obviously a lot of time in the gym, whether we're having practice. We try to get into open gym at night too, so we can have kind of 20-30 minutes just to get shots up on our own. And our coach, Justin Gray, comes in and usually rebounds with us. And, I think it's been an interesting bubble for me. Obviously, I've struggled on the court, so it's been tough off the court because you can't get away from the sport in any way, shape, or form. And you're not around your family or people who typically can help you through that stuff. So it just feels like you're always in your own headspace and you're always kind of in your own place. Fortunately, I have Amanda and Kia here, the other Kia, who have kept me sane, and they've been fun, and we laugh, we joke. If you watch The Lounge, that's literally our life. I do wish there was more cameras in this house to capture everything, but it's been a lot of just like practice because I hurt my ankle in that first game and I haven't been able to get it right. And it's been bothering me since. I've spent a lot of time in the treatment room with Terry, and she's been making sure that we try to keep it as less swollen as possible and as happy as possible, so when I get out there I can move as much as possible and pivot as well as I can. So I've spent a lot of time there, and then the rest of the time really has just been like in my room, biking around, sometimes at the pool. Just depends on the day really, but at this point in the season, as the season continued to go on, because you're playing every other day, it's exhausting. Like you're just tired all the time. So if you can sit in the sun, like kudos to you. Stokes can do that. She can sit there for hours. I cannot. I just need to sleep or lay in my bed. So that has been the toughest part about the bubble, is just like you're literally alone other than your teammates, and some days you need to not see your teammates, but you have to.
Of course. Yeah, that's understandable. I completely understand that. So obviously you were on a one good tire most of the season, but you've obviously shown an unwavering toughness to play through that, because some players would not be willing to play in the Wubble through an injury like that. You know what I'm saying? What has kept you so tough to just tape the ankle up, get back out there, and just keep giving it another shot?
Well, I feel like we unfortunately have just like, at New York, we've had bad luck after bad luck after bad luck. We had Jasmine go down with an ankle injury just towards the end of training camp, so she wasn't available for the first 2 games. Then I went down in the first game. Then Sabrina went down later in the 3rd game. So we just kept hitting a really bad stretch of injuries. And for me, when I first went down in the Seattle game, and I was like, something doesn't feel right. Like I roll my ankle all the time, but this one just didn't feel right. Something felt like it moved, and I was like, this isn't right. So when I went back into the locker room, like I was just angry. Like Terry left me to go back out to the game, make sure everything was okay. And I was like, I'm fine in here. Like, we'll just ice it, whatever, get the doctors. And I was just mad. Like I was angry crying because I was like, you put all this effort in, like you get through the COVID situation. I found ways into the gym. I was lifting in my garage, makeshift, making things up. And then you come in here and you're like, damn. Like I went through an entire training camp without taping my ankles. And I tape my ankles for games because that's what I typically do because they're more unpredictable. And I tape my ankle and I roll it. Like, what is how? So I think that really was like the tough part for me. And after that, I'm like, all right, well, what are you going to do? You don't have a choice. It's rolled. It is what it is. The doctor said your ligaments are looking okay right now. So we'll just go and do it as it turned purple, yellow, orange. It turned so many different colors on both the inside and the outside. And I just said, we're going to rehab the crap out of it. So me and Terry were in there like 2 times a day because I knew in this schedule, you have like one game next day, 1 game next day. So I can sit for 2 weeks like I typically would with an ankle injury and miss 3 games in a regular season. Here, if I sat for 2 weeks, I would have missed 6, 8 games. Like it was crazy. So I think that, I'm very stubborn headed. So that probably was one of the big pushers for me. I think I did, if I could redo it, I probably would have sat out that Dallas game, or I think it was the 2nd game that I came back for. I probably would have sat it out. Because I think I was out there and I don't think I was helping the team in any way, shape, or form. But I knew I had rehabbed my butt off for the last 3 days that we had. And I felt good, but it just wasn't where it needed to be. And I think I probably may have sat out for 2 weeks and missed those 6 games. I'm not sure. Because it hasn't been right. But it's really a matter of like, we unfortunately just have gone down with injuries after injury after injury. And I wanted to do everything that I could to try and help my teammates. For me, what I've realized is watching film and stuff, like it's hard because I'm a player that relies a lot on like stops stops and starts, pivots, running, being able to turn, shoot in the air. And I
Things that
haven't been able to
require
get
ankle.
I haven't been able to get my foot to do that. And I'm at the point now where I don't think about it, but when I watch it on film, I'm like, I didn't do it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been the pusher there and trying to figure that out. But injuries are a part of basketball.
Right.
That's been really frustrating for me. I don't feel it, like mentally, I don't feel it, but when I watch it on film, I'm like, I could have cut that a little bit quicker and I didn't. So just needing to get that back to where it needs to be.
Makes sense. Well, I'm wishing you the best of health with that. And like I said, like I get it, because being an athlete, like I played a half a season at the University of Connecticut with a wrist that probably was broken, and I wore a cast in every game in practice just so I could play. So I was playing with 3 fingers. So I get it. Like I understand, like being an athlete, I feel like being an athlete, I'm retired, but you being an athlete and relating to the life, we're stubborn. You know, we are, sometimes we can be our own worst critic and we can't get out of our own way. You know what I'm saying? We do spend a lot of time trying to, you know, we know we're hurt, but you love playing and love being a part of your sport and playing with your team, that you are willing to go through some pain in order to get there. So to be honest, I feel like anybody can understand, like at the end they want to help your team win and you just want to play too because you just love the sport. So I could totally understand where you're coming from, and you know, the ankle's going to be fine. You know, you just got to keep turning the wheel. Kia, you have done a few hits now on TSN. You spoke on the platform about social injustice and things that obviously being a Black woman you've dealt with. Even your brother has gone out to speak about being a Black man in the NHL and how there's things that need to be done on that front. What has it been like for you to not only use your platform to speak about the injustice that happens to Black people in this country, but also advocating for Black people in your own country, in Canada? Um, being able to see both sides. And, you know, me and you have known each other for years now, obviously. And I remember me having a conversation in college, and I remember we were talking about, you know, you being from Canada and this and that. And I remember I was talking about myself. I was being, I don't want to say insensitive, but I was being so direct with you about, yes, you are biracial, but in America, like here, it's so based off color. Like if you look Black a little bit, they're going to treat you like you Black. They're not going to care about you being biracial. And, you know, I look back on that conversation and I'm like, that might not have been fair for me to say, you know what I'm saying? Because obviously you are biracial and you do have 2 different, you know, cultures in your life. Look back at it now, like what has it been like being a woman, and a Black woman and a biracial woman, having to speak on these topics and having the opportunity to inform people, not only, like I said, in Canada, but in America?
Yeah, well, it's been definitely, super heartbreaking to see what's going on in the world and the fact that it's still continuing to go on after it's something that we've read in history books from years ago. And I think one of the striking things is I took an American history class as an elective in high school. And I remember looking at the dates and I was like, this wasn't that long ago. Like things haven't been thousands and thousands of years ago when all of a sudden, Jim Crow laws didn't exist or Black people could eat in the same restaurant as white people. Like that wasn't that long ago.
Right.
And I think that was something that always kind of triggered me because I would hear my dad talk about when my grandfather was born. And I was like, wait a second, that was before all that. Like, so things like that. It's been really a privilege though to be able to speak from my own personal experiences on both, the US and the Canadian side. I do spend half the time in the US and then half the time in Canada. So, growing up there, I think we did talk about it. When I was younger, I never really had to think about, oh, like I'm Black or I'm white. It was just like, I'm half, I'm mixed. And I feel like there was also times in high school where I felt like I didn't really fit in with the Black kids and I fit in more with the white kids, or vice versa, So I think that was kind of tough for me growing up. And the toughest thing that I find when I have to speak about this is that I always get okay, well, this is an American problem. Like, it's just something that happens in America. And I'm like, well, that's not true. Like, this happens all around the world.
Right.
Like, I've had conversations in Australia too, where there isn't a whole lot of Black people in Australia.
Right.
So, you know, there's conversations around that there too. And I think what's interesting is in Canada, obviously we have it looks different, right? So a lot of times in America, you're going to see it blatantly on Twitter, blatantly on Instagram. Somebody filmed it. And there's probably a number of instances that haven't been filmed, which is frightening to think about too.
Right.
In Canada, it may not have been filmed, but you may have experienced it in a microaggression. It may have been the same thing that happened in America, just wasn't on film.
Right.
And, you know, we always talk about how Canadians are so polite and how we're so inclusive with everybody. And we're like a mixed salad. You know, America's a melting pot. We're a mixed salad.
Right.
We have our own problems, right? Like no country is perfect.
Right.
And I think growing up in Canada, you know, with a white mother and a Black father, it just made sense to me. Like it was like normal that, you know, people who didn't look alike could love each other and have a great family and have a great life. But I know my dad talks to me about stories about him coming up in the football world and things that people would say. My brother has coming up in the hockey world, us in the basketball world. So it's really, for me, been a privilege to be able to speak about my experiences and be able to educate and inform on both sides. I've sat down with a group of my friends and they've asked questions. Like they want to know what I've experienced in the States versus what it is here. So I think it's been really interesting to talk about. And I think it's been great to see so many different people and so many young people stepping up and using their platforms and using their voices and knowing that they're the next generation and that we want to leave it so that when my nephew Jax grows up, because he's 2 months old now, when he grows up, he's living in a better world than what we lived in.
Right.
And I think we understand that it's not going to happen overnight. I think there's a lot of hard conversations that need to be done. I think there's a lot of tangible change. The other hard part is that when people ask you like, okay, so what needs to change? It's not that simple. I can't give you like a one word answer of what needs to change and then everything is fixed. Like it's so many different, right. The system is so huge. So I think there's a greater conversation around that, a greater conversation around inclusion in sport. I had a conversation with Team Canada about inclusion in sport and that was really interesting to hear too. So yeah, it's definitely been interesting. It's been a lot, but I'm grateful to have the platform to be able to speak out on these things.
Yeah, no doubt. I definitely, you know, I've said this to all the athletes that I've had come on this platform. And I just think the biggest thing for like most professional athletes is you guys are superheroes. You know, people look up to you. And especially people that look like you know what I'm saying? They specifically resonate with you. And the platform and the ability to influence, I say, you know, I always I give all my athletes a vote of confidence, like go speak the truth, you know, have the uncomfortable conversation, because at the end of the day, without it, there is no progress. There is no change. Obviously, we need tangible things done, but it all starts at the conversation. If you're not willing to talk about it, the tangible change will not come. And I definitely feel like all the athletes who are, you know, Black, white, whatever, if you're speaking on it, speak on it and tell the truth. You know, don't mute yourself. You know, at this point, we live in a world where the racism is so abundant and so obvious that you addressing it's not gonna hurt you, because people know this is what's going on at this point. So you're not stepping on any toes. You're not, you know, devaluing yourself by just telling the truth. And I tell all athletes, like, tell the truth, speak your mind, because people are listening and your influence is needed. Because I do say, like, I'm not one to say that the Black Lives Matter movement is a movement, because for me, I am Black. This is real life. This is things I experience every single day. You know what I'm saying? And I can say I've had a number of experiences where I felt like I'm obviously, you know, I'm being looked at because of the color of my skin. And this is the life we live. So those fighting to help change the life that I live and you live and other people that look like us live. And we got to keep fighting for that. And one day, you know, I hope to have children that they're going to look like me and they're going to be Black. So it's like, like you said about your nephew, you want them to grow up in a world that is not like the one that we live in right now. And there's no guarantees that when they grow up, it's going to be the best, but we got to start fighting for that change now. And I definitely feel like watching this over the last, you know, months or so, the athletes, in my opinion, have been the most impressive because people follow behind the figures that they think are superheroes. You know what I'm saying? And athletes are the modern day superheroes. You do things that other people just physically are not able to do. And people marvel at it. You know, sports are the one thing in the world where I could say give the world a momentary time of peace because people will all tune in to watch whatever sport. And for the athletes to take charge and go forth, I think that is, you know, it's going to go a long way for years to come. But moving on, Kia. So you're an auntie now.
Yeah.
So what has it been like, obviously being a new auntie? You haven't been able to see your nephew as much because you've been inside the Wubble.
Yeah.
But what is it like being a new auntie now? Like you have like a fake son.
I know he's a little squish. He's like tiny. When I met him a little bit before I left to come here. He was born, I think, 2 weeks before I left. So he was still like this little itty bitty thing, and I just didn't want to like drop him or anything. That was my big thing. But I already call him my best friend, even though he doesn't know it. I'm hoping the fact that me and my sister look alike is gonna do me well, so that now while he's hanging out with her while I'm gone, when he sees me, he's gonna like me automatically.
Mm-hmm.
But he is adorable. His name's Jackson. We call him Jax. He honestly is the first extension, like legitimate extension of our family. Like we all have significant others, but like he's the first like legitimate little half nurse. So I love him. Like he's like my favorite person. I'm like, no matter what goes wrong, you can always call him and he's just gonna stare at me. Like he doesn't talk, but
Mm-hmm.
at least he like makes some noises at me and like giggle, and I'm happy. So when I go home, I'm just gonna like squish him. I think he's getting too big on me. But he does and will always have the coolest Jordan gear and Jordan shoes. He'll be the swaggiest kid. I don't care. I'll get him whatever he wants.
So, you know, being in the bubble, what is not even just being in the bubble, just COVID-19 as a whole, because the coronavirus has completely, you know, shook the world. And, you know, we can't do a lot of the same things that we were used to be able to do. What's one thing you miss most about just coronavirus not being around? If there's one thing you miss being able to just freely do without the mask, without, you know, the precautions, what is one thing that you miss most?
Can I pick two?
Yeah, pick as many as you want.
Okay. One, I really wish that I could just travel back and forth over the borders, so I could go see some significant people in my life. That would be important. And two, going to the grocery store, especially being in the bubble right now, going to the grocery store is like a legit thing that I actually miss. I never thought I would because I get really overwhelmed when I go there and just end up buying too many snacks. But Instacart is what we've been using, which is obviously the easiest thing for us to get. But like, I like to pick out my own fruit. Like that's what I've realized because I don't know. Sometimes I look at like I can't see it, and I'm like, all right, I hope they get like one. Sometimes you know you always go to the back shelf so you get like the later expiry dates, and I'm like, I think they just picked it off the front. So that has been like one of the biggest things. I also really miss getting my eyebrows done. It's like a big thing for me.
That's fair. Was there? But wasn't there a salon in the bubble?
There was. Yes, there was. It was obviously booked very often. There's a lot of us, and there's only two of them. But yeah, I did get my eyebrows done while I was here, and it was very relaxing because it made me feel like I was not in the Wubble for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they did everything, and it was covered. Everything was free, so that was really awesome too. But yeah, I didn't even get there to do my hair. I meant to do it, but I just got the eyebrows done.
When you were in the bubble and, you know, the first thing, like, what was your first interpretation of, like, when you guys had your first game in the Wubble, there's no fans, There's no crowd noise either, right?
No, not really.
So
Like
there's
you
no
just hear
crowd
random.
noise. Yeah, it's just an open gym. So what was like that first, like when you walk into this gym for a professional WNBA basketball game and there's no
Yeah.
crowd, there's no crowd noise. It's not even like the artificial attendance.
Yeah.
What was that first what was that first like experience like?
It was weird. And then what it reminded me of was in the 2016 Olympics in Rio.
Mm-hmm.
We scrimmaged Spain before like a legitimate game, but we just did it in the practice gym. So that's what it reminded me of. And I was like, this is like a scrimmage. And you come out and they're like, and it's time for your New York Liberty, right? And like, we just wave. Like, we wave to the walls. We don't even
Yeah.
care. We're like, we're out there pretending people are cheering for us. Now it's really funny because as the games have gone on, the people who work the score sheets and the scoreboards, they all clap when you come out. So like, it's like you have a little bit of happiness, but the music during the game helps out a little bit. But the crazy part is like, you can hear all the trash talk. So
I
like,
believe it.
if you're on the bench, we have people on the bench that like to talk. So it's like, you can hear it on the other end of the court. Yeah, that's actually really funny because you literally can hear everything and the microphones pick up everything.
I believe it. So let me ask you this. What is it like? 'Cause, I don't want to take you up too long. I got a few more questions for you before I let you go. But what is it like, having the referees around? Like, what if you got a tech and then you got to go on the beach, or you go to the pool, and the ref that just teed you or ejected you from the game is like getting his or her tan on. Like, what has that dynamic been like? Has it been
It's
real
actually
awkward?
been a thing. It's been a thing. Obviously, I haven't gotten technical. I've had a couple choice words with some of the referees. Nothing crazy, I would say, but it's definitely weird. I think sometimes when you're walking through the lobby, I'm like, should I say hello? Should I wave? Did we make eye contact? Like, you can hide a little bit under the mask, like your face doesn't show as much. But yeah, it's been funny because I'm like, when Diana said like see you in the lobby, I was like, that's it. Like I can't like it's been quite funny. It's that and like seeing other teams and like I'm friends with a bunch of people, like whatever. So it's just like hi. But then there's like if you got trash talked by someone last night and then you walk past them in like the hall, you're like, or like people who have been on other teams and got traded and then like they're stuck in the elevator with that coach that traded them, like it's like
awkward.
Weird. Yeah.
Is this the closest thing to AAU you've been in since your AAU days?
Yeah, I would have to say so. I mean, we didn't even do a whole lot of AAU in Canada, and this feels like AAU.
What is AAU Canada like? What is AAU because in America it's like it's a factory in America. AAU is a legitimate factory.
No, it's not the same. It's opposite. Like you guys start your girls' high school season in the winter. We start our girls' high school season as the first day of school. Like that's your first tryout usually. So you do that, and then when you guys are in high school season, we're in our version of AAU, which is like the Canadian season. So we play together, and then when you guys start AAU, we've already been playing together for like 6 months. So then we go beat some teams really quickly until they get their team chemistry belts. And
so
then
you have your
own
AAU team though.
Well, we have I do. Oh yes, I do. I love them.
What is it like having your own AAU team with your name on it?
It's weird because like I see my dad walking around. He's the director, but I see him walking around with like Keaner's elite pants on or like Keaner's basketball, and I'm like, Dad, this is weird. But it's really cool for them. Obviously, they get the opportunity to play like provincials, which are important in Canada. It's like you play for your state essentially, and then you play the nationwide one. So they can play provincials, they can play national team stuff, no matter what it is, and then they can also play AAU. So we did it so that they could do kind of all three of those things, but mainly because you get looks. If you want to go to the States, you go to AAU and have the opportunity for those schools to see you. So we wanted to make sure we could get them legitimately in the best possible situation. Right. And for us, that was Nike UIBL, because at the time we started it, I was a Nike athlete. So Nike backed it. They help us fund the girls. They get to do it a little bit differently than I did it. So when I was in AAU, we stayed with our parents, like our parents drove us to the game and all that fun stuff. Well, these guys, they get to stay with each other. So our team and our chaperones, they take them to the tournaments. They stay in hotel rooms together. It's more like a training camp team environment that they'll probably experience in college and they'll experience in other aspects.
Right.
So we try to set them up for that stuff and allow them to get looks while also representing their country or their province, whatever it is. And we try to do it at a really good price, so that these kids, I don't want my AAU team to be like how AAU is starting to be through every sport, where it's like, it's just a money grab. Like, this is a nonprofit organization. I want these kids to get better. I want them to have an opportunity to play in the States, and play in a great league. And they do that. So it's fun to watch them succeed. Like, they do a really, really good job.
I agree. I agree with you though. I think AAU should be about the kids first and not the money. Yeah. And I do think sometimes it does become more about the money than it is about the actual success of the kids in the sport. So I 100% understand where you're coming from with that. Before I let you go, this is probably the last thing I'm going to ask you, and all done. What is it like for you being Canadian, going to UConn, All-Star, Jordan? If you look at that all together, you are kind of like, for Canadian women's sports, you are like one of those trailblazers. How important is it for you to keep that going? And how humbling is it for you to know that there's kids out there, boys and girls, that are watching you manifest all these things, and they are following you and they want to be like you? What is it like having that spotlight and being able to influence young people to want to strive to be like you, and obviously beyond that?
To be honest, it's like the world's greatest challenge. I think I'm really fortunate to have this position and be in a place where someone could consider me a role model. I think I learned a lot about that when I was younger, and especially after the Pan Am Games, because that's kind of when stuff started to get going like that. And you really have to pay attention to what you're doing, right? Like, I have to pay attention to what I'm posting on social media, because there's kids that are watching and looking, and they're doing, especially nowadays, people do whatever they see on social media. And I think that's a big part of it. The other big part of it is, like, I want to succeed all the time so that they can see that. You don't really want to have like a bad year, like a bad career, because then they don't want to be like you. I would want them to want to be like me. So I try to face adversity pretty head on, so that they can see that too. But a big part of what I want to do, obviously with Kia Nurse Elite, and also when Kia Nurse Basketball Academies get started up too, is give kids the opportunity to kind of be in a gym and me be there with them, and see that, like, I'm just like you. Like, we all do the same things. We wake up, like, we eat breakfast, like, because so often we can see people on TV. Like, I can see LeBron on TV, and I'm never gonna meet him in real life. I have, but like, when I'm younger, I can think that, right? Like, never met him. He's just a superhero way somewhere else, like almost outworldly. When we're really just like typical humans, like we're goofy, we do everything everyone else does. So that's probably the biggest challenge with it, is that, like, you want to always succeed because you want them to know that they can succeed too. But you also have to face the adversity that you face and the struggles that you face head on, so they can see it's all right to do that. It's all right to fail once in a while, especially in a world that we don't really accept failures. Like, we only talk about people who have really, really good life stories. Like, the people who have succeeded, the people who have made it from, some crazy thing that happened to them when they were younger to where they are now. And we don't really see, like, I think it's called survivorship bias. Like, we only see that story, and that's how we think it works, where it's like, there was probably hundreds and thousands of other people who went for the same thing and unfortunately didn't get it. But we only talk about success stories. So I think it's okay. I want to make sure it's okay that these people see it's okay to fail. And you're going to do it your own way. It's about how you can get back up. So I find that to be the greatest challenge in having that platform and being a role model.
I think that's so dope. And I think that's so relatable too, because I think the one thing I took from it is, like, you talking about, everybody needs to have this survivalist, success story. And I just kind of relate this back to me, just us doing this right here, because, for people who have followed me know that I went to college, I played football, my goal in life was to be, go to the NFL. I wanted to play professional sports, and that didn't happen for me. And doing this is like me trying to show other kids that, especially who come from like my circumstances, like my type of environment, where, you know, I grew up in those environments where, you know, a lot of black kids, and especially from the area I'm from, are told like, you know, football, rapper, NBA, like it's pretty much like an athlete, or you're some sort of, or you're like famous for like music or something. It's not, you don't have the variety or the range to be more than what you could be. And I use this to show people like, you know, I have a lot of young people who watch my content. Majority of my followers are probably between the ages of like 7 and and 19, because there's a lot of kids. And I want them to watch this and feel like, you know, obviously they want to be like the Kia Nurses and the Gabby Williams and, you know, the Amanda Zali B's of the world. But for the other ones who watch and know, like, I may not be that. You can be like J-Rob, you know, you can find another lane and excel at it. You don't have to be an on-air talent or a personality that talks to people, but you can be more. You just got to know that you can be that. So I do understand, like, I definitely get it. You know, I try to use this platform not only for myself and my love for just talking to you guys, you know, like, I just enjoy being able to sit down and have these type of conversations, because I do firmly believe the athlete is important. You know, I think athletes have the ability to create these platforms and engage people in ways that they don't realize. And I think the greatest thing about this conversation we're having is, to the kids or the people that are going to watch this, you humanized yourself so well in this. And you just said it. You think, like, when people see LeBron James, he is this larger than life person, right? And that's how you view him. And I even said it before, athletes are superheroes and people look at them like superheroes. But my whole thing for even starting Balltalkers, this whole thing started off the strength of me wanting to humanize myself as an athlete. And then after humanizing myself as an athlete, I wanted to humanize the people that come on my platform. And you just did that right in the time we just spent on this platform. But that's what it's all about. You know, it's about showing people that that we're not so different, and you can be whoever you want to be if you got to just believe in it, and it'll come. And there's people out here who are just very relatable to yourself that are trying to show you that it's possible. So
Thank you. I
no,
love what you do on here. You make it easy.
thank you. I appreciate that. That's my goal. I want all the athletes to feel good to be up here. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want. My goal is to never be the sports person that's like criticizing and my judgment, because I was an athlete once, and the judgments made about me as an athlete, just me as a person, it broke me at one point. And I know what that's like. It's hard. It's not easy. And I do want the people who come on here to feel like this is just a space for you to be you. But Kia, this is a sad day because this is the end of the Inside the Wubble series. It's the last day, but I am glad that you got to be our final interview. I know a lot of people have been wanting me to get you on here. I'm glad I got you here.
I've been wanting to get on here.
It's only, you saved the best for last, right? That's what they say.
Aw, you're too kind.
Save the best for last. But thank you so much. Good luck with the ankle. Good luck to way to close out the rest of your time inside the Wubble. And I will see you soon.
Thank you.
No problem.